I used to think that the secret to getting people's attention and getting people to listen to my podcast was to start right away with a lot of energy. But I want to do things differently, and my podcast is different. Instead of trying to give you instant gratification, I'm going to invite you to slow down instead. Whatever made you click on this link, whatever you were interested in gaining from the conversation that I'm about to have, see if you can set that aside and just be present listening. Instead of listening to it like you'd listen to other podcasts and try and get a whole bunch of ideas, listen to it like you would listen to poetry or music. You listen for meaning and for feeling. And I invite you to do this because I think if you do, in fact, I know if you do, you're going to see a very rich depth underneath the surface. This is the Rich Life Realization Podcast, where we explore the richest life possible. So if you want to reach high, if you want to reach for the stars, if you want to build something incredible, something big, you actually have to go in the opposite direction. You want to go down. You want to ground yourself. You want to create deeper roots rather than just reaching high. We're going to be talking about that in this episode. I have a very special guest on the Rich Life Realization Podcast. His name is Nikon Gormley, and he is a wisdom warrior. So a literal ninja. He did taekwondo tournaments, but then he found something called the Three Principles, which has brought so much clarity, grounding, and wisdom to his life so that he knows how to reach down to grow something really big, to make something even better. Because I think if you just reach up, it just topples over. So we're going to be discussing this. Welcome, Nikon.
Hey, Rich. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Absolute pleasure and honor to be here and share your space and to talk about the best thing we can talk about. The inside out understanding the three principles and how it applies to the good stuff we're up to.
Yeah. And so I got to be on your podcast last
Right.
time.
That's right. That's right.
And in between, we were having conversations, and I said, okay, Nikon, you have to be on my podcast because you're awesome.
Thank you.
And I asked you what you wanted to talk about, and something that you feel like you're seeing more and more lately, that you've had conversations with coaches, is that if you want, you really need to focus on grounding, on throwing roots down.
Sure. So I can tell you where that conversation was born out of. So I was talking to our mutual teacher, Michael Neal, great human being, wrote The Inside Out Revolution of Space Within, Create the Impossible. And I was doing a one-on-one session with him, and I was wondering what to ask him during the session. So I thought, well, he's this world-renowned success coach. So I want to ask him about how do I get to this next level of growth, of business. You know, I was really much looking like upwards. And then he said something to the effect of, well, the higher you want to go, the deeper you want to go. And I kind of did the Scooby-Doo, like, what does that mean? What do you mean go deeper? We're going to the wrong direction, Michael. We want to go up, not down. That's where we came from. And then he said, well, no. He said, think about it like a tree. Like the higher, the taller the tree, the deeper and stronger the roots need to be. The taller the building, the deeper and stronger the foundations need to be. And as you said that, I could hear my aunt's words in my head about how the foundations of a house are the most boring and tedious parts to build, but they're the most important parts because if the foundation is not strong, whatever you build on top of it will not be steady, and it will not be. You'll spend a lot of time wobbling and stressing and being anxious about it. And I sat with that, and then this intention came over me where I wanted to see more into that. I was like, what does that even mean, Michael? What do you mean go deeper? And he said, it's to see, at least what occurred to me is to see this inside out understanding in a more simple way, more simplicity. And I just sat with that intention, and I trusted that life, universe, God would take me there. And since then, I've noticed a quiet, slow deepening of understanding myself and my connection and the things that just feels like a more grounded place of being.
Mm.
And then I would say the implications of that is I thought I was calm, and then whatever this is, it just feels like not trying to be calm, but just like a natural state of being, a natural state of calm and groundedness and peace. And it's not like something I'm trying to do. It just makes sense to be in this place because things look a lot more simple. And I found that I've I've said no to more things lately that I would have said yes to out of insecurity or out of like FOMO, fear of missing out. And it's not just things are a lot more clear. And I do credit the grounding for that because I can see more clearly what I really need for me versus what I would have tried to reach for out of insecurity or fear or doubt.
Mm.
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 One another example, I was giving a talk the other day at a university, or like a learning, yeah, it's called a university. And he said, how do you do that thing? I was like, what thing? He's like, how do you speak in such a calm and slow manner and yet so inviting? And I opened my breast, my blazer, and I said, "Oh, it's this button here under my blazer." and then and then I sat with it and I said, I think it comes across that way because I'm not I have no agenda. I'm just here to share the best thing I know. That's it. I feel no rush to say it quickly or say it in a way that impresses you. I'm just here to share what I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, I think I was listening to George Pransky,
Mm.
and he was talking about speaking or coaching, and he said, well, it's actually none of your business what they get from it. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you just share from your grounding,
Mm. Hmm.
and it's none of your business what they get from it. And you
Hmm.
can't control that anyway. You can't control what they hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's gonna sound weird. It's just by being in the room, your grounding will do the work
Mm.
for you. You don't even have to say anything. You could just stand there, and the people's lives will change.
Yeah.
It 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 it's from the overflow. Oh. I'm noticing a lot of things that Michael would say, like he used to say before, I didn't really get until now. It's when your grounding is so well taken care of. There's an overflow of love. There's an overflow of abundance. There's an overflow of well-being because you're good. And then people get to experience from that overflow. So you're no longer trying to help people. People are just being helped by you being in the room. And that's far more powerful to me than trying to reach higher and higher to try and prove something or try to um, see how high you can get. Like, who knew? I was looking the wrong way most of my life.
You were looking up when you
Yeah,
should
to need to look
be
within
look
and
within, look down, or look
look
within.
down. Yeah, yeah, look
Yeah.
within, look down. And
Mm.
then even then, like business is better. Business feels more effortless.
Mm.
Um, I have a taekwondo business and a coaching business and another sports business I'm building. And it's just it just feels right. I don't know how to explain it. It just feels like I get to give to it from more than enough rather than scraping the barrel. Mm.
Yeah, it reminds me of I did a CTI, the Creating the Impossible with
Yeah,
Michael Neal,
yeah, yeah,
and I was busy trying to find the right words and
yeah.
find the right images and find the right ways to say things when really it's where you say it from. It's that grounding, that
Hmm.
presence that
Hmm.
that makes the difference. And this also reminds me of, I remember Dickon Bettinger has a metaphor of the wave,
Hmm.
and he was trying to make himself be the biggest wave possible
Yeah.
and look up in that way. And I remember one time he said, don't look up, don't look towards making yourself a bigger wave. Look down and toward the ocean, toward that
Mm.
connection. Because the trees that grow really, really tall, not only do they have big roots, but they're
Mm.
connected with other trees. They're supported
Yeah.
by other
Hmm.
trees.
Hmm. It's a great metaphor. Mm. It also occurs to me it's definitely a journey and a process
Mm.
to you don't get instant McDonald roots. It doesn't work that way. Roots take time and they take energy and attention and and nurturing and love and yeah, it's like an inner journey towards yourself. And I think in this conversation, if people are listening to it, I dare say that when you learn where to look, it's a much easier journey. Because to me, and I'm making this up, life has to spend less time and energy trying to get you to look inward. I think we spend a lot of time like chasing things outside of us to feel better, to feel acknowledged, to feel loved, and life is going not there. Hmm, that makes a lot of sense. They used to say about Dick and Benninger, or Michael would say like he's the hardest working man in spirituality. Like like he would like I think sure that's why I resonate with your story about how much effort we put into managing our thinking and managing our well-being and writing like for me it was like writing affirmations or visualizing or having the perfect morning routine in hopes of creating this fleeting result, and that if things worked it was the universe, if things didn't work it was my fault, I didn't visualize enough, or I was entertaining too many negative thoughts or something like that. Yeah, all unnecessary.
Yeah, it's funny when we start to realize that we've been spinning our wheels trying to create something that doesn't need to be created, something that we already have. And we already have this grounding, actually. We already have the full depth. And and we can see that in an instant. We can see that, boom, but it's kind of living into that.
Absolutely. I love that phrase, living into that, because you could choose not to do that,
Oh,
right? But then why would you, right?
yeah.
And then I think this conversation is like, it's like turning, what's it called? It's like going to work, and then just one day somebody shows you a way that takes 30 minutes less and it's far more beautiful. It's like, why would you not want to take
Yeah.
that route? And it's always been there. We just didn't know. We just didn't see it.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, you might, out of just like muscle memory, turn down the wrong way, but you're like, oh, it's the other way is gonna save me. You're just gonna do a UE. It doesn't take
Yeah,
any
yeah.
effort. Yeah.
It doesn't take any effort and not any mental effort. And conditioning is a hell of a drug. Like if like people are so used to doing it the hard way, or they're so used to having it be hard that they don't know any other way. And then even when things are easier, they don't trust it. Like why is it easier?
Yeah.
Why, this sounds like therapy, or this sounds like fluff. Like you can't have all this great results without the mental stress or effort. Like that's not how things work.
Yeah.
And all that is conditioning.
Hmm.
And that to me, that's how we keep ourselves from deepening our grounding, from deepening our roots, is we're not in that open and curious and calm space within ourselves to be curious about that.
Yeah.
Thinking back, what was my curiosity with this is I would spend a lot of time with like taekwondo world champions, Olympic gold medalists, Olympians, and it always pissed me off at how calm and peaceful they were. Like they did not look at all stressed about being so goddamn talented. I know, it would just piss me off. I'm like, how are you not working hard at this? Why do you look so chill? And then I would learn much later that to them it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Like in their state of mind, walking around. But when you when they step on that ring and they go to training, they're really involved. Like they're 110% involved,
Mm.
but they're doing it with a very calm state of mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're clear. They're not in
Right.
their
Right.
heads while they're performing. Because
Right.
if you're in your head while you're performing and you make it about how I'm doing
Hmm.
what I'm doing
Hmm.
while I'm doing it,
Yeah.
then it takes you out of the game, and that's what happens when
Yeah.
people choke, and
Yeah. 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 And they do that, but they course correct a lot faster than anybody realizes because they're like, oh, not that feeling, this feeling, and then that was my curiosity. I was like, why do you look like you look like you're putting in half the effort? Like, why? How? It doesn't look like you have like you're constantly looking at your list of affirmations or you're visualizing. It just looks like you're having a good time.
Mm.
You're not allowed to do that. Like, how? I need to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's actually kind of the next question
Mm,
that I have
sure.
is especially probably what our listeners are wondering,
Hmm.
and you've already kind of given a hint to it. So, but how do you get more grounded? How do you grow those roots? And you said something that was interesting. They said not this feeling, but this feeling.
Right. So let me speak to that. Not this
Yeah.
feeling, this feeling. Not this feeling means busy-minded, disrupted, anxious, fearful. Not that feeling. This feeling, calm, clear, open, curious, highly, highly present to the moment.
Mm.
That would be the distinction. That's a good question. How? I can share what makes sense to me.
Sure.
Well, first we have to define grounding, right? So I will share like the grounding defined by Nikon Gormley, not empirical truth. To me, grounding is the degree to which how well you're connected to who you really are, your true nature,
Mm.
the feeling of being yourself, how how well you know you're made. Mavis Karn would say it's either you know how well you're made or you don't, and that's grounding. The more you know how well you're made, it and coming from that place and living from that place, it deepens your wisdom because it's your connection to wisdom. And it creates that channel for you to be mentored by wisdom, like Elsie Spittle would say, like let wisdom mentor you. And it's almost like the deeper you're grounding, the more open you are. So the how to me would be looking inward and opening yourself to your wisdom, listening to your wisdom, allowing, surrendering, waking up to your true nature, to the feeling of being yourself.
Mm.
And it's highly destructive. You will hate it, I guarantee it. Like riding on this unicorn with like rainbows and shit. It's a highly disruptive experience because it disrupts what you know to be true about yourself and your world. And it's like, can you imagine going through life thinking you're a piece of shit or you're not good enough, and then all of a sudden to see that you're not? that, to see that you are whole, that you are well, that you are deserving of good things, that you are made of God stuff. Like that's really disruptive. It changes the way you approach life. It changes the way you approach people. It changes the way you talk to people, the way you talk to yourself. And it takes a lot of time and grace to for that to settle. At least that's been my experience. Like you'll get a life realization, like the rich life realization, and then you need time to settle into it. I akin it to climbing a mountain where like the higher you go, the air changes and you need time to acclimate.
Mhm.
You
Hmm.
need time to adjust. It's like that. Because if you do it too fast, you're gonna mess up. I was doing a training camp in Mexico for Taekwondo, and it was in the mountains, and I thought this is fine, having never been in high altitude before. And I was going full out training, and sure enough, 15 minutes, I was like, I'm so tired. Like, what is this? Like this, like I'm fit, I'm prepared for this. I'm like, no, you're just not used to the air here. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna sit down. And is that I really admire and acknowledge everybody who's willing to go on this journey to learn more about their true nature and willing to disrupt their lives at the deepest levels because it's a highly disrupted place. And I'm so grateful for people like yourselves, like teachers like Mavis Karn or Michael Neal, Dr. Dickon Bettinger, Pransky's, because it's helpful for people to who are already there to tell us you're not going to die. You know, like that, like you're okay. Just hang tight,
Yeah.
and that this is whatever your process is going to it, like you're okay, because it's like that thing of like, the first person to ever have a hangover probably thought they were going to die. Can you imagine having a hangover and not knowing what a hangover is? Like how crazy would that be? Like, oh, I'm gonna die, my mouth is dry, like this is it, and someone tapping you on your shoulder like you have a hangover. Like what's a hangover? It's like, oh, when you drink too much wine and you're dehydrated. You're like, so I'm not gonna die? Like, no, you'll be fine. Here's some water. And that's what these conversations are like. They're like signposts, if you will, that you're okay.
Yeah. It's important to remember, but it's also not something that you have to like. I'm gonna create and hold, or you talked about understanding our divine engineering or knowing
Correct.
that, and it's not
Yeah,
like, oh, I have to figure it out and then hold that in my mind, and if I do that, oh, then I'll be okay.
right. That's a great point, what you said. And to speak to that is our habitual way of doing things.
Mhm.
Our habitual way of approaching things is problem solving. It's like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get to this. I'm going to figure out the right way of being. And if I'm the right way of being, I'll have automatic grounding. It doesn't work that way. And what's available is reflecting and being and sitting in reflection and sitting in conversation and sitting with people who see this. And it's a very, very different approach.
Mm.
It's something I wish I knew way sooner in my athletic career. I would have been way more successful because as an athlete, I was like, oh, I'm just going to attack this person. And when I learned to really reflect on this person in the moment, I was a far better fighter. I was a far better competitor. It was like I was just enjoying this moment with this person. Sure, I was there to win, but I was reflecting on it rather than I need to figure this thing out.
Mhm.
That's a really good point. And actually, I want to speak to that too. Is this is not like another. If you have grounding, you'll feel better. If you, it's like it's not if then. It's not a formula. It's not something. It's not another thing you're missing in your life.
Mm.
It's not another reason why you think you're a piece of shit or you're not good enough. It's it's recognizing empirical truth of who you are. Hmm. And like when we learn to articulate gravity, it changed humanity because we learned to work with gravity. And we could build things and we could our engineering got better, our physics got better because we understood how gravity worked. So when we understand our divine engineering, our grounding, our true nature, the way we approach life changes. And then, right. So to me, the way it looks to me is you stop looking for things to feel better and you realize you start letting go of the things that you were holding yourself, that you start letting go of the things that were making you feel not good enough in the first place
Hmm.
because it makes less sense. I love this new saying by Michael Neal. It's like, why would you hold a thought over your well-being? It doesn't make any sense.
I think that there is some sort of like satisfying thing for the ego about it though. I
Oh,
think that
absolutely.
falling into the illusion, it's kind of like you either fall into the illusion of it or you fall into your own presence. And there
Hmm.
is something satisfying to the ego, but ultimately empty about falling into the illusion of it. That you're like, oh, there's something there. It's kind of like a fool's gold.
Yeah,
There's there's
absolutely
there's something
something there.
there. It's shiny and it's bright
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. And it reminds me of that saying is, before enlightenment, wash dishes,
Mhm.
clean the floor. After enlightenment, wash dishes, clean the floor. And like your ego is not going to evaporate overnight. You just have a better relationship with it.
Mhm. Yeah.
The best thing I've ever seen about that is I remember I invited Dr. Joe Bailey to my podcast, and I was preparing to interview him, and I asked him, "How do you want me to call you?" Like Dr. Bailey, Dr. Joe Bailey. How do I do this? And he said, "Oh, just call me Joe." And something in my Asian brain snapped because you're not allowed to take yourself off a pedestal. Like who do you think you are, Dr. Joe Bailey? You can't do that. And I asked him about it. I said, "Why do you say that?" And he said, "Well, it used to mean something to me. Now it doesn't. Just call me Joe." And I thought, I want to be like that when I grow up.
Mhm.
Because he wasn't saying it to try to be cool. Like that's just who Joe Bailey is. That's his grounding. That's his like whether he's Dr. Joe Bailey or Joe, he's Joe.
It sounds like he saw that the label was just the label and that the real who he
Mm,
really was not the label. And so,
absolutely.
and I think a lot of people attach meaning to the label
Hmm.
and they lose the meaning underneath of who they really are.
Absolutely. 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 And it was so refreshing to spend time with Joe because
I saw you hitch right there.
yeah, I was like, with Joe. Even saying that sounds so disrespectful. Like I have an Asian filter in my head. I'm like, you can't like you're such a bad student. Disrespect. How dare you? And to see that and go, well, that's what the man wanted to be called. We call him Joe. And to experience in that, to experience that grounding. I'm like, oh, that's what it's like. This is what it's like. Hmm.
Is this idea is it something you share with clients and do you have a story of a client
Sure,
seeing this?
sure. So I can use clients. I recently did some work with corporate clients. So they're a very large tech company, and we were doing a 2 day offsite, and they wanted to work on leadership, alignment, strategy, culture. And the very first thing I told them about was because they're growing very, very fast. They're growing from like the beginning of the year or like the year before 50 people to 400 to 900 people in a year, right? Like imagine being in charge of that or being the team in charge of that. Holy shit. And I brought up the tree metaphor. I told them this is what I see as being an offer. So for context, before that, I asked everybody, why are you here? What do you want from these 2 days? And what do you think's in the way of that? And then I shared, well, here's what I see. Here's what I see why we're here. You're growing very fast. Your tree is sprouting like, there's fertilizer in the ground. They're like, we're growing really fast. And the danger of that is if you do not put down strong roots, this whole thing will collapse on itself.
Mm.
And what we're here to do over these 2 days is deepen your grounding and deepen your roots. And I would draw it on a flip chart. And you could see that the roots had to balance out the big tree. And I pointed to that these roots are not just for your company, but for yourselves. If you are going to lead bigger teams, if you are going to grow as a leader, you need stronger roots. And I didn't say it in like a threatening kind of way, like if you don't do this, you're all going to die. I said it in a way that from my heart, because that's what I really wanted from them. I genuinely wanted them to see that they need to work on their roots. And that if they do work on their roots, the tree will take care of itself. The metaphor that on a fruit tree, the fruit is the last thing to grow on a tree, not the first, not the second. It is the last thing to grow on a tree, the fruits. And that's an example of taking this into business, into corporate, into leadership, is at a fundamental level, everybody gets this, that their grounding is incredibly important. And over the 2 days, you could just see them, like they got quieter in their heads. And like you could see as they got more quieter in themselves and they started to listen within, they were just so much better at things like reflecting and coming up with innovative ideas for their company. Like the ideas they came up with in those 2 days probably added, I would say, at least $5 to $10 million to their top line revenue.
Wow.
Because of simple little changes that were right in front of them all along. Mm. And that's not to say that number happened overnight, but the direction to that became very clear. Whereas before, when they were trying to approach it from, let's say, a place that was not grounded, and there was a lot of noise that they couldn't see through, a lot of like distractions. But now that the way is clear, the next steps are obvious, or they require less mental effort at the very least, and fewer resources to say. Yeah.
One thought that I had about the roots, the grounding, is that it's largely invisible. Like you can see the tree, you can see the leaves, but you can't see the roots. They're invisible, they're in darkness, they're unknown. And as a tree, if you pretend that you're the tree, you can't like say, okay, I'm going to do this. You almost have to feel your way into the grounding of it and grow and feel your way underneath the surface of who you are.
Absolutely. In fact, if you're listening to this and you want a lived experience of this, is after you listen to this, go outside if you can and find a big ass tree or a big tree and see if you can feel the roots. Not with your hands, just sit with the tree and notice the roots underneath your feet. And that'll give you an idea of what we're talking about. Because you can feel the solidness of the tree that's being held by the roots. Yeah. How cool that we know this now and we can talk about it and we can share about it. That it's not hidden away in some ancient text or like a vault. Like how cool that we know this now.
It's amazing.
Also, to grounding, it's something we can tend to. It's something we can tend to. Most of life is out of our control, but our attention is something we control. And we can give our attention to our grounding. We can give our attention to wanting to know more about our true nature and feel into it and get a felt sense. Yeah.
It's powerful understanding, and thank you so much, Nikon, for being on the Rich Life Realization podcast. If somebody listens to this and they're like, I want to talk to that guy, how can they reach out to you?
You go through my agent, Rich Life.
I'll send them your
No,
way.
yeah, I'll send them your way. You can go to nikongormley.com, NIKONGORMLEY.com. You can find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn. Uh, I'm in all those cool places. And say hi. I have um I have a free office hours I do the first of every month, which you joined.
Yeah, it
That's
was
something I wish.
awesome.
Oh,
Join
thank
that.
you.
Seriously.
Yeah,
It was phenomenal.
thank you. It's something I wish more people did is have free open office hours for them to get an experience of what we're talking about. Because I get it. I've been on the other side before. What we're talking about is so abstract to people who are not used to it. And and it sounds kind of weird. It looks kind of weird looking from the outside in, and so it's really helpful for to get a taste of it, to see what it's like to be in this conversation. And that's why I created First Free Tuesdays. So the first Tuesday of every month, I have open office hours. You can join, you can ask questions, you can watch me work with other people. And if you're a practitioner, I encourage you to do the same, to open your doors once a month for people to experience this conversation, experience getting to know their surroundings.
Well, and just so you know,
Yeah.
after attending yours, I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm gonna definitely do that. I'm gonna have office hours and kind of free coaching drop-ins, and
Yeah. Yeah.
they'll be on Mondays, every other Monday for me. So you inspired me. So thank you, Nikon.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you share that with me on LinkedIn, I'll help spread the word.
Cool.
I'll help spread the word because everybody needs the world would be a better place if more people knew about their grounding, if they could spend more time living from their true nature and their true essence. And that's at least that's why I'm doing it. So I want a better world for everybody.
Me too.
Cool.
Yeah. This has been the Rich Life Realization podcast. Your vibrant life is a single thought away.